Hello, I'm Doretta. My parents used to say I was too sensitive to handle real life, so they left me with a rotting cabin on a mountain ridge, called it my little nature project. Meanwhile, my brother and sister walked out of the attorney's office with multi-million-dollar resorts and city blocks. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know what was buried under the trees. And when I tried to protect it, they mocked me, then stalked me, then tried to erase me. Why would your own family fight so hard to destroy something they claimed had no value? Would you still call it worthless? If the land itself remembered more than they ever would? I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the seating arrangement. Isolde and Clayton were planted square in the center of the lawyer's mahogany conference table, a pitcher of lemon water between them like some smug trophy. Me. I was tucked into the corner, half hidden behind a crooked blind and a stack of untouched legal pads. The only light hitting me came from a flickering wall sconce. The attorney, Mr. Foster, cleared his throat with that stiff formality only old white men in pinstripe suits could deliver. We're gathered today to execute the will of Eunice Rilke. My heart skipped. Grandma's name always did that to me. Isolde leaned back like she owned the place, which, technically, she nearly did. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun, not a strand out of place. Her fingers tapped against her phone, manicured, sharp. Clayton, across from her, flipped through a packet with an air of boredom, like this was just another Thursday. I waited, heart thudding, hands clenched on my lap, thinking maybe, just maybe, Grandma left me something more than dusty memories and summers spent sweeping pine needles off the porch. And to Isolde Henley, Foster read, Eunice bequeaths a 51% stake in the Henley Resort Group, including but not limited to the Aspen and Sedona properties. Isolde smirked. Clayton smiled without warmth. And to Clayton Murney, she leaves full title to the Denver South Commercial Plaza and adjacent parking structure. A nod from Clayton. No surprise there. I braced. And to Doretta Allen. Mr. Foster glanced at me, a flicker of something like pity in his eyes. She leaves the family cabin located at Ridge Trail, Telluride, Colorado, and all its contents. The silence was blistering. Isolde blinked, then snorted. Clayton didn't look up. Dad, sitting at the far end, not legally involved but of course present, let out a dry chuckle. She always liked the wild, he said. Might as well give her to the wolves. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I sat there nodding like this was all fine, like it hadn't just been confirmed, out loud and on paper, that I was the expendable one, the worthless one. They thought I wouldn't notice the way Isolde's friend Michelle whispered something and laughed as they left the building. Or how Clayton took the parking garage deed and folded it like it was a takeout menu. I trailed behind them, clutching a thin envelope labeled Cabin Keys Legal Transfer, D. Allen. Outside, the late afternoon sun stabbed through spring haze. People passed by in suits and sunglasses. Isolde's voice cut through the chatter. She got a cabin. We got an empire, she said, too loud to be innocent. A man with a Bluetooth headset chuckled as he passed. That's brutal. I turned away before they could see me flush. My fingers tightened around the keys like they might disappear if I let go. On the drive to Telluride, my phone lit up once. Dad, of all people. One text. Don't let this make you feel small, kid. You've always been different. He meant it as comfort. It didn't land that way. By the time I reached the base of the mountain, dusk had settled like smoke across the valley. The trail leading to the house was rougher than I remembered, potholes deepened by snowmelt. I drove slow, the tires crunching over gravel and damp pine needles. The house emerged like a ghost, gray, weathered, sloped into the hill like it belonged there more than I ever did. The front steps creaked as I climbed them, my boots brushing off layers of pollen and last year's leaves. The key fit the lock like it had never been changed. Inside, it smelled like cedar and cold ash, like her. The walls held that stubborn mountain silence, the kind you could only earn after decades of storms. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I knew my way by heart, down the hall, past the kitchen, where the kettle still sat on the old stove, and up the narrow staircase to the attic. That was where she kept the chest. Always locked, always for later. I stood in the dim attic light, my breath catching as I looked at it, still there, still untouched. I hadn't thought about that chest in years, but now, I couldn't stop looking at it. My fingers tingled. They thought they gave me nothing. They had no idea what they'd handed me. The air inside the house was colder than I remembered, not just from the altitude or the mountain wind that pushed against the old frame, but from something quieter, heavier. I flicked on the light by the doorway, but only one bulb in the chandelier flickered to life. The rest had long since surrendered to time. I walked slowly, letting my fingers brush over the dusty wood paneling as I moved through the hallway. The place hadn't changed. Same cracked mirror by the coat hooks, same uneven floorboards that creaked like whispers. The scent of cedar and something older, liniment maybe, still lingered. It was like walking into a memory I hadn't dared to open in years. I stopped in the kitchen. The kettle was still there. Her blue mug too, the one with the chipped rim. I used to sit by the stove, sipping chamomile from it while she hummed something low and wordless, her back to me as she stirred soup. I set my bag on the counter and exhaled slowly, like maybe that would help me catch up to whatever the hell I was supposed to feel. Gratitude? Betrayal? They'd handed me this house like it was a joke, like it was supposed to humiliate me. But the way the floor welcomed my steps told a different story. I climbed the stairs, each one creaking under my weight, as if the house was waking up too. At the top, the attic door waited. I hadn't been up there in years, not since the week after her funeral. I used to ask about the chest, the one she always kept locked. She'd smile and say, "Some things have to wait for the right eyes." I pulled the key from my coat pocket, the one Mr. Foster had handed me in the same breath as he signed my exile. The lock turned easily. That alone startled me. I thought it would resist, stick from disuse, or refuse to open like it wasn't time. But it clicked open with a strange kind of readiness. The chest was just as I remembered, wooden with brass corners and a tiny painted flower on the lid. Inside, layers of cloth, old and soft, wrapped around something solid. I peeled it back slowly. There, tied with a thin red ribbon, was an envelope, my name, written in that looping, slanted cursive I knew better than my own. To my wildflower. I sat down on the attic floor before I opened it. The paper crackled slightly as I unfolded it. Her scent was still there, lavender and something earthy. The letter wasn't long, but it reached somewhere I hadn't let anyone touch in years. My sweet Doretta. They never saw it, did they? Not the way you did. Not the trees when they bloomed in late May. Not the birds nesting near the old ridge. Not the way the house listens when the wind changes. But you did. You always did. This land has things they couldn't see. But you can. You must. That's why it's yours. Tears slipped down my face before I even realized they were coming. I folded the letter back and held it in my lap. Beneath it were hand-drawn maps, topographic, messy, marked in pencil and ink, photographs yellowed with age. I recognized the land, but not like this. The maps showed parts of the property no one had mentioned, sections that stretched past what I thought were boundaries. One in particular caught my eye, a ridge marked with a red circle and 3 words in her handwriting, not forgotten yet. I spent the next hour on the attic floor, sorting through maps, sketches, notations. She'd been watching something, tracking it, preserving it. I had no idea what it was, but she'd trusted me to find out. Eventually, the cold forced me back downstairs. I lit the fireplace and made a cup of tea from a dusty box in the pantry. The mug warmed my hands, but it was the firelight that settled something in me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what might still be here. I leaned back in the old armchair by the hearth, where she used to sit, knitting in silence. The crackle of the logs reminded me of Christmas 2 years ago, the last one I attended with the family. I'd cooked the entire dinner, cleaned every dish, set every place card. Not one of them thanked me, not even a nod. When they started talking business around dessert, Clayton handed me a towel and said, "Would you mind wiping down the buffet?" I remember the way my cousin Nadine leaned over and whispered, "They treat you like the housekeeper, you know that?" I'd smiled like it didn't matter, like I hadn't felt that truth digging at me for years. But tonight, with her letter beside me and the fire warming my legs, I didn't feel like the help anymore. I felt like the only one listening. I brought the old maps to the dining table and laid them out. Then I pulled out a county land survey I'd printed years ago, back when I considered buying an adjacent trail lot. I spread it beside hers. They didn't match. 2 inches off the current property line, something was marked on both maps, a ridge that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I drifted in and out, mind looping around those 2 inches on the map that shouldn't exist. By dawn, I was already up, coffee in hand, jacket pulled tight. There was something about how quiet the mountain got just before sunrise that always made me feel like I was trespassing, even in a place that bore my name on the deed. I was tracing the old property lines again in the living room when a knock broke through the morning stillness. Not a heavy knock, just 3 quick taps, casual like someone stopping by to borrow a ladder. I wasn't expecting anyone. My stomach went tight. When I opened the door, there stood a man in a puffer vest, clipboard in one hand, cheap travel mug in the other. "Morning," he said, too cheerful for this altitude. "Sorry to bother. Just doing a walkthrough for a potential buyer." I blinked. "Buyer?" He glanced at his clipboard like it would tell him what lie to use next. "Yeah, got a call last week. Said there might be interest in this property. I'm just here to check things out." "Shouldn't take long. You have a name?" He hesitated. Too long. "Mark." "Mark? Just Mark?" His smile was tight. "Your sister said it'd be fine." There it was. He said it like he didn't even realize the slip, but I caught it, every syllable. "Which sister?" I asked, though we both knew. He shifted. "Isolde." I didn't invite him in. I didn't need to. That one word was enough to ignite something hot and sharp in my chest. "I think you should leave," I said, voice steady. He didn't argue, just gave a lazy nod, muttered something like, "No harm," and walked off, slow like he wanted to look harmless. I watched until his SUV disappeared around the bend. Back inside, I stood by the window, heart hammering, rage building in layers. Isolde didn't just want me humiliated, she wanted me out. Completely. I hadn't even unpacked everything and she was already moving to sell it out from under me. I barely had time to sit down before I heard tires crunching again. Another car. A FedEx truck this time. The driver handed me an envelope without making eye contact and left like he was late to confession. I knew that letterhead before I even opened it. Clayton's firm, Murney Stone, LLC. Inside were the documents, proposed buyout terms. No cover letter, no explanation, just numbers. A price so far below market value, it was laughable. 10 days to respond, sign and relinquish everything. Or else. What? They hadn't spelled it out, but I could hear the message between the lines. Don't make this hard. They were trying to starve me out with paperwork. I folded the documents and shoved them into the drawer next to Grandma's maps. That was the only place they belonged. By noon, the sky had cleared, and the mountain air had that sharpness that only early spring carries. I changed into hiking boots, pulled on a windbreaker, and packed both maps, hers and mine, into a plastic sleeve. I headed for the ridge. It took nearly an hour. The trail was barely there anymore, swallowed by roots and fallen pine. I remembered this path. Grandma used to bring me up here on Sundays. We'd carry peanut butter sandwiches and a thermos of apple cider. She never said much, but she'd pause often, touching bark, pointing at moss, humming under her breath. Back then, I thought she just liked trees. Now, I wondered what she was watching. At the halfway point, I paused to compare the maps. Sure enough, her version showed something mine didn't. A boundary that stretched farther west, past a line of trees that looked untouched. I pushed deeper, heart pounding. Eventually, I found what I didn't know I was looking for, a series of flat stones, set deliberately, too even to be natural. They formed a rough semicircle. Around it, remnants of wire fencing long since rusted to bone. Something had once stood here, and someone had wanted it hidden. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the silence. That night, I didn't bother with the fireplace. I sat at the dining table, maps spread out, laptop open. I wasn't writing a response to Clayton. I was drafting a request to the Telluride County Land Office, citing potential discrepancies in recorded boundary lines. I attached high-res scans of both maps. I used the words historical oversight and possible unregistered site. At midnight, I finally shut the laptop, stood to stretch, and caught a flicker of movement outside the window. A soft buzzing, low, mechanical. I stepped quietly toward the glass. There it was, a drone, hovering just beyond the trees, red light blinking. Camera pointed straight at my house. It hovered for another 10 seconds, then zipped off into the night like it had seen what it came for. Someone didn't just want the land. They wanted me gone, fast. The morning after the drone sighting, I didn't go outside. Not immediately. I stayed inside, blinds half drawn, pacing between the kitchen and the den with that tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. Whoever sent that drone didn't just want to look at the house. They wanted to unsettle me. It was a message. I made coffee. Strong, black. My hands were steadier after the second cup. Mid-morning, my inbox pinged. A message from Bonnie Kessler, a family friend, or at least someone who used to pretend to be. She'd attached a video clip with the subject line, "Thought you should see this." I clicked play, not knowing I'd regret it before it even hit the 10-second mark. There was Isolde, standing at the front of the room during the inheritance meeting. Designer blazer, perfect posture. She held a sheet of aged stationery and read aloud in that voice she reserved for public sympathy. Her voice cracked, strategically, as she reached the closing lines. "This land has things they couldn't see, but you can. You must. That's why it's yours." My stomach dropped. I knew those words, knew them like a song you've hummed since childhood. That letter, those exact words, had been written to me. I pulled open the drawer where I'd kept Grandma's original. The handwriting matched, the creases, even the little ink smudge at the top corner. The only difference, the one Isolde read had been stripped of the salutation. Mine still began with, "My wildflower." I stared at the signature for a long time. Then I saw it, a faint pencil mark in the corner I hadn't noticed before. Your version, not theirs. I didn't cry. That part of me had hardened. What broke instead was something more painful, a splintering of trust so deep I could feel it reverberate through my ribs. How long had they been rewriting me? They'd taken credit before, yes, business ideas, decorations, even meals I'd made, but this was the one pure thing I had left of her. And Isolde stood in front of a room full of people and made it hers. By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted. I logged onto Facebook just to scroll mindlessly, anything to pull my mind elsewhere. That was a mistake. The post was from Mallory, one of Isolde's high society besties. The caption read, "When your little sis thinks she's Snow White but ends up living in a squirrel trap." Attached were 3 photos of my mountain house taken from God knows where, probably with a zoom lens from the trail. The post was titled, "Cabin Life for the Financially Useless." I stared at it. The hashtags were worse. #mountain maid, #eco-joke, #leaf, it alone. Dozens of likes, laughing emojis. One of the comments even tagged me. "She really thought she was gonna Airbnb that thing?" Someone else replied, "Guess Grandma wanted her to have something she couldn't ruin." I closed the laptop. Not slowly, not gently. I pressed the lid down like I was shutting a mouth that wouldn't stop laughing. Then I stood, grabbed my jacket, and walked out to the back porch. The wind was sharp, clean. It bit through the layers like truth does, unforgiving but clarifying. The ridge was visible from where I stood. Just a line of trees and sky. But it was mine. Not in the legal sense, at least not yet, but spiritually, emotionally. It was the one place where the echoes of her voice still lived without distortion. "They can take credit," I whispered, half to the trees, half to the ghosts. "They can take pride, but they won't take this." I went back inside. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I deleted my social media that night, every platform, blocked every cousin, every so-called family friend. I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, silence felt like protection. Then I did something else. I started taking photos, real ones, of the ridge, the soil, the bark patterns, the plants I remembered Grandma once labeling by Latin name. I opened my old hard drive and pulled up a preservation proposal I'd drafted years ago but never submitted. I thought it was silly then, naive. It wasn't now. Before midnight, I had a folder of documentation. Not just to prove value, but to prove they didn't see it. The final thing I did that night was send an email to someone I hadn't spoken to since my university days, Dr. Carrie Morales. She now worked with the Colorado State Ecological Division. Subject line, "Possible undisclosed ecological site, need review." I attached photos, GPS pins, and a personal note. "You once told me real preservation begins where the money ends. This place is bigger than me. I just need someone to see it." Then I hit send. I didn't go to bed right away. I lit a fire. I sat in the old rocker that creaked under my weight, and I waited, not for them to call or apologize, but for dawn. Because morning meant one more day I still had the ridge. They thought they could scare me with a blinking light in the trees, that I'd pack up, call it quits, and go back to Denver with my tail between my legs. But something shifted the moment I sent that email to Dr. Morales. It wasn't just stubbornness, it was clarity. The next morning, I opened Grandma's journal again. I hadn't read beyond the first few pages before, too afraid of what I might find. But now, I needed answers. I needed her voice. The spine cracked as I reached the entries from 1984. The ink had faded, but her script was still meticulous, tight loops, purposeful spacing. One passage stood out. April 2nd, 1984. They sat me down and told me my shares would be redistributed, said I was too sentimental to be trusted with expansion. Clayton was still in college, Isolde barely out of high school, but their father decided it. He said my softness made me a liability. I let them have it, not because I agreed, but because I knew one day this house would outlast them all. A few pages later, another line was underlined twice. My only revenge is to leave something they won't be able to sell. I closed the book, hands trembling, not from shock, but from a kind of relief. I wasn't imagining it. Grandma had been pushed out too, not loudly, not with shouts or slams, just with legalese and polite betrayal. She'd left me this land not out of pity, but as her last act of defiance. A torch passed in silence. That afternoon, I picked fresh wildflowers from the trail behind the ridge and placed them under her old rocking chair by the window. She used to sit there with a quilt in her lap, eyes on the horizon, like she was waiting for something to return. Maybe she was waiting for me. "You weren't weak," I whispered. "You were quiet power." I stood there for a while, letting the memory wash over me. Then I went to work. Back in the kitchen, I booted up the laptop. I dug through my old emails and found Travis Fenner's contact info. We hadn't spoken in a few years, not since he sold his last story and opened that cafe in town. But if anyone still knew how to get through to the State Conservation Network, it was him. I called. He answered on the second ring. "Doretta?" His voice still had that husky, careful tone. "Wow, haven't heard from you since, well, a while." "Yeah," I said, trying not to let too much time crowd into that word. "I need a favor." "Name it." I told him about the land, the maps, the survey discrepancies, the drone, and Grandma's journal. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a pause. Then, "I know someone at the Western Preservation Trust. She's blunt but fair. I'll send her your name tonight." "Thanks, Travis. Really." "Hey," he added, almost softly. "They always underestimated you, didn't they?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Just before sunset, a manila envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a small packet of photographs and a folded letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name at the bottom wasn't. Ellen and Marcus Dobbs. They'd stayed at the house the year before I moved in full-time. Just a weekend retreat, they said, nothing fancy. I'd barely interacted with them, but the letter said everything I hadn't known they were holding. "We lost our daughter to cancer in 2019. We couldn't breathe for months. But here, at your grandmother's cabin, we slept through the night for the first time. We laughed. We made a fire and talked until dawn. This house didn't just give us shelter, it gave us peace. Thank you." Inside the packet was a photo. Ellen and Marcus sitting by the fire, hands entwined, their faces soft with something I could only call recovery. I held the photo like it was a lifeline. This place wasn't just mine. It belonged to anyone who needed what it offered, and I'd be damned if I let them strip it down and pave it over. By nightfall, I had everything lined up, drafted the formal preservation request, scanned the maps, attached the drone footage. I even included the letter from the Dobbses, with their permission. I CC'd Isolde and Clayton on the email with one line: "You have 10 days to retract your buyout offer. After that, this land will no longer be yours to claim." I clicked send and felt no fear, no hesitation, just calm. Like I'd finally stepped into the role I was meant to hold. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. No voicemail. Just a single text. "We warned you. Don't make this ugly." I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down on the table. Too late. They wanted me silent. I was done whispering. By the time the knockoff threats started coming in through anonymous texts, I knew something bigger was boiling under the surface, but I didn't expect it to come in the form of smoke on the horizon. It was 2 days after I'd sent that preservation proposal and issued my warning to Isolde and Clayton. The morning was warm, too warm for mid-April in the mountains. The wind had an unfamiliar edge to it, dry and erratic. That afternoon, sirens started wailing through the valley. When I stepped outside, the air had already started to change, acrid, sharp, full of tension. Wildfire season had arrived early. The emergency alert came over my phone just minutes after I noticed the reddish haze over the ridge. Lightning had struck dry brush on the south slope. Flames had already spread toward a few scattered homes lower in the valley. Evacuation orders were being issued. But my cabin, thanks to its position up the north crest and the fire break I'd cleared last summer, was in a relatively safe pocket, at least for the moment. By late afternoon, the road down the mountain was packed with trucks and cars heading out. I stayed. Around dusk, there was a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, I found a young couple standing on the steps, backpacks, soot on their clothes, fear in their eyes. They'd been hiking the ridge when the smoke started rolling in. They saw my lights and came looking for shelter. Behind them stood an elderly couple I recognized from the general store in town, Mr. and Mrs. Hankins. Their trailer had been in the path of the flames, and their son's truck had broken down mid-evacuation. "Please," the woman whispered. "Just until morning." "Come in," I said, moving aside. The cabin filled with voices and footsteps, blankets, cans of soup, tea on the stove. My grandmother would have called it sacred chaos. We made a place for everyone to sleep, mattresses pulled from the upstairs guest room, sleeping bags in the living room. I stoked the fireplace and boiled water. There wasn't any time to panic, and truthfully, I didn't feel fear. I felt useful. By morning, the fire had shifted directions. My house remained untouched, but the photos I'd taken, the aerial map, the preservation file, the drone snapshots, now shared space on my kitchen table with a stack of Red Cross flyers and a growing pile of local donations dropped off by volunteers. Someone had snapped a photo of me handing a blanket to Mrs. Hankins. That image landed on the front page of the local paper with the headline, "Mountain Woman Turns Junk Property into Life-Saving Shelter." Within hours, my phone started buzzing again, but this time with reporters, conservationists, people asking for comment. And then, Isolde. Her text came in short, sharp. "You're being reckless. You don't know what you're starting." I didn't bother replying. She knew exactly what I was starting. That evening, I went outside to walk the perimeter. I needed air, needed space to think. The sun had just dipped behind the western range when I caught movement near the back of the house. A flashlight beam swept across the tree line, not random, controlled. Someone was searching. I ducked behind the tool shed and waited. The figure came closer. Tall, fast, not local. The beam hit my back window. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping forward. "You lost?" The man froze, then bolted. I gave chase, not because I thought I'd catch him, but because I wanted him to know I saw him. He cut through the side fence. A slip of paper fluttered out of his pocket as he ran. I scooped it up. It was a notebook. Inside, dates, times, photos of me coming and going from the house, grocery receipts, even GPS logs. My stomach clenched. The name Clayton Murney was printed in small, neat script on the inside cover. So they were watching me, not just from afar, from right here. I walked straight back inside and picked up the phone. That night, I filed a police report. Then I sent a cease and desist letter to both Clayton and Isolde through the county courthouse's online system. I didn't wait for their response. Instead, I recorded a video. I stood on the porch, wind pushing my hair back, the mountain ridge behind me glowing faintly under the moonlight. "To the people who want me gone," I said into the camera, "you've tried silence. You've tried mockery. Now you've moved to stalking. Let me be clear. This land is under review for preservation. The process is public, transparent. You can't intimidate truth." I posted the video to every platform I had left. It went live at midnight. By noon the next day, it had over 50,000 views. The comments poured in, messages of support from neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, offers to help with filing, security systems, even food delivery. I didn't realize how many people had been quietly watching, waiting for someone to stand up to the Henley name. That afternoon, a new envelope arrived, stamped in bold, State Preservation Board, official correspondence. I opened it with steady fingers. Inside, a formal acknowledgement of my submission. It read, "Provisional designation, Ecological review phase approved." They tried to erase me. Instead, I turned into a headline. The mountain didn't respond to threats. It responded to care, to patience, and apparently to paperwork. Because a week after the state issued the provisional designation, a team of state ecologists and surveyors showed up in 2 dusty Subarus and a rental Jeep with faded conservation stickers on the back window. I met them at the trailhead with hot coffee and a file folder thick with my grandmother's maps and my own recent findings. They were younger than I expected, 20s, 30s, but they moved with reverence. Nobody asked where the nearest road was. They didn't flinch at the slope or the chill in the air. They were here for the land, not for me. Dr. Elaine Chan, the lead ecologist, flipped through the topo maps while one of her assistants scanned coordinates into a GPS tracker. "These overlays are incredible," she said quietly. "Some of these contours haven't been documented in state records for decades." I walked with them. Through pine and spruce, over moss-covered stones, across the trail my grandmother used to take with a walking stick and a tin of salted almonds in her coat pocket. The forest was awake that morning, birds in low branches, something rustling deeper in the brush, the crunch of last fall's leaves underfoot. After nearly an hour, Dr. Chan paused mid-step. She knelt beside a rocky outcropping, brushed aside some pine needles, and ran her hand over the soil. Then she turned to her team. "This is preservation gold," she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. By late afternoon, they'd flagged several key points of interest: soil diversity, fungal networks, migratory markers, and, most surprising, evidence of a unique microclimate nestled into a natural bowl between 2 ridges, somehow untouched, undisturbed for over 80 years. I stood back and watched it happen, barely breathing. Then came the moment I'll never forget. A young intern named Rafi, barely out of grad school, glasses too big for his face, let out a surprised yelp from across the trail. The group gathered around him quickly. When I reached them, he was pointing at a grove of trees growing tightly together, their bark a hue I hadn't seen before, faintly blue, almost like steel with a shimmer of ash. Dr. Chan stepped in, her voice calm but alert. "That's Engelmann spruce," she said slowly. "And not just any. These are blue-barked, a variant that hasn't been confirmed in this region since 1897. She pulled out a field guide from her backpack, flipped through pages, then stopped. "These trees are listed as critically rare, protected at both state and federal levels. Some of these are over 200 years old." I looked at the cluster of trunks, the way their roots wound deep into the soil like they belonged to a different century. My grandmother must have known. She must have protected them by doing nothing at all. By the end of the day, Dr. Chan had filed an emergency recommendation for permanent ecological protection. The paperwork was expedited. A site that had been mocked as worthless had now become legally untouchable. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the community center in Telluride as reporters filed in. The press conference had been hastily arranged by the preservation board. I hadn't planned to speak, but when the microphone was offered, I stepped forward. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. This was never about owning land, I said. It was about respecting what outlived us, what taught us, even when we weren't listening. The room went quiet. I could feel their eyes, not just on me, but on what the ridge now represented: legacy, endurance, silence that spoke louder than wealth. I saw one of the board members glance at a plaque being prepped for the final designation site. It read, Eunice Rilke Natural Preserve. Her name. Finally. After the conference, I caught a glimpse of Isolde outside. She was dressed in designer neutrals, sunglasses too large for her face, lips pursed like always. A reporter asked her for comment. She gave a polished half-smile. "We always knew the place was special," she said. "Just happy it's finally being recognized." Clayton didn't show up, but I heard later that the state had opened a formal inquiry into his professional conduct. Apparently, hiring a private investigator to track your sister on a protected site while serving as her legal counsel doesn't look great on a bar license. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't even call Travis. I just went home, made tea, and sat in Grandma's chair by the window. That night, as I folded laundry, the TV played in the background. A news anchor mentioned the preserve briefly between weather reports and city council updates. Then the screen changed. Isolde's face appeared. She was in her high-rise apartment, a wall of windows behind her. The camera caught her mid-smile, mid-sentence, describing our family's generational connection to the land. But then the segment shifted to footage of me on the ridge, the press conference, the trees. Her smile froze. She didn't finish the sentence. She picked up her phone and turned away from the camera. "We're not done," she said, voice low. Maybe not, but I was done being erased. This time, I wrote the ending myself. 2 weeks after the press conference, the Preservation Board scheduled its final review hearing. I arrived early, not out of nerves, but because I wanted to see the room before it filled. The Telluride Preservation Office was housed in a renovated brick schoolhouse with high ceilings, mismatched chairs, and the faint scent of old pine floor polish. The folding tables at the front were already laid out with printed maps, documentation packets, and a carafe of lukewarm coffee. I stood at the windows, watching as a few staff members checked microphones and connected the livestream equipment. The ridge loomed in the distance, quiet and steady. My anchor. At 10:14 a.m., the board called the meeting to order, and at 10:16, the glass door swung open. Isolde entered first, wearing white like it was armor. Not business white, blame-free white, the kind that screams innocence while daring someone to call it anything else. Clayton followed, his usual calm face pulled tighter than I'd ever seen it. They hadn't been invited. They didn't need to be. The board's notice had gone out publicly. They walked in like they still owned the room. "Before we get started," Isolde said loudly, flashing a smile that could cut glass, "we'd like to request a family discussion regarding the final deed." The board chair, a balding man named Fred with glasses he kept losing in his own pockets, looked up. "This isn't a family negotiation. This is a state-level land designation hearing." Clayton stepped forward, placing a folder gently on the table. "There are legal inconsistencies in the title transfer," Ambiguities worth reviewing. He sounded polished, but I heard the desperation in the rhythm of his words. I didn't flinch. I didn't wait for them to finish their performance. Instead, I walked to the center of the room, took the folder I had prepared, thick, precise, every page in order, and placed it on the table. "Here's the signed deed," I said clearly. "Notarized, filed, supported by the Community Preservation Committee, 5 local landowners, 2 independent ecological surveys, and a full report of historical value. I've also included video documentation from the wildfire relief effort and the drone footage showing the ridge's condition pre-survey." Isolde crossed her arms. I turned to face the board. "This house isn't mine anymore," I said. "It belongs to the land, and to the people it will serve." Silence. One of the board members nodded slowly. Another cleared her throat but didn't speak. I turned back and caught Clayton's eyes. He looked down. Isolde's fists were clenched at her sides, the way she did when she wanted to shout but knew it wouldn't serve her. The live stream picked up everything. The meeting adjourned with no debate. The mountain house, the land, the ridge, the old growth, now officially listed as the Rilke Allen Preservation Sanctuary. Outside the office, the local reporter who'd first posted about the wildfire shelter held up his phone. "Doretta, mind if we use a quote?" I smiled softly. "They gave me the trash," I said, not unkindly. "I built a sanctuary." By evening, the clip had gone viral. Again, messages flooded in, from environmental groups, strangers in Vermont, a former student of Grandma's who now taught earth science in Oregon. Even Mallory, the one who once shared that mocking post, commented with a public apology. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Backlash hit Isolde's resort chain within days. Comments about hypocrisy, accusations of greenwashing, petitions to have her name removed from upcoming land projects. Sponsors quietly backed out. Online campaigns gained traction. Her PR team tried spinning it, but the internet doesn't forget. As for Clayton, the state bar opened an ethics investigation. The phrase conflict of interest made its way into formal letters. I didn't ask for any of it. I didn't need to. I had done what I came to do. 2 weeks later, I stood at the cabin's front door one last time. The new signage had just been installed along the trail, a small wooden post carved by hand with my grandmother's name etched beneath the preserve's title. I locked the door, turned the key slowly, and stepped back. The place felt full, not empty. Not like I was leaving it behind, but like I had finally set it free. "They took everything," I whispered, not bitter, just honest. And then, almost smiling to myself, I added, "and gave me freedom." Freedom tasted different than I imagined. It didn't come with fanfare or champagne. It arrived quietly, like spring snow melting under sun-warmed stone, gradual, persistent, unmistakable. A month had passed since the preservation deed was finalized. I returned to the ridge not as an owner, but as its keeper in a different sense, its witness. The land no longer belonged to me, but in that surrender, I found something far better than ownership. I found peace. The opening of the Telluride Mountain Preservation Center was simple. No ribbon cutting, no press frenzy. Just a small gathering of volunteers, conservationists, and locals who had followed the story and showed up in their hiking boots and layered fleece jackets, ready to work. Some cleared trails, others replaced weather-worn signage. The wind carried the faint scent of pine sap and earth. Birds moved freely overhead, unconcerned with boundaries we humans insisted on drawing. A young girl, maybe 10 or 11, stood inside the exhibit room near the fireplace. She wore a purple backpack and squinted as she read the plaque under a yellowed letter displayed in glass. I didn't need to read the letter. I knew every word. Grandma's handwriting. the same one Isolde had once tried to claim as hers, but now it hung with the truth restored. Beside it, a new wooden sign carved by hand read, "The Rilke Allen Heritage Ridge." She would have hated the fuss, my grandmother. But I think she would have liked the people here, quiet types who understood that silence doesn't mean absence. That afternoon, I walked the loop trail alone, not out of habit, but out of a need to feel the earth give under my steps, to listen for the soft click of branches overhead. Each footfall felt like an echo answering back. By the foot of the old spruce, I paused. I didn't speak aloud, didn't need to. I just let myself feel the weight of everything that had come before. Every dismissal, every silence, every time I was made invisible, and then felt it lift. Later, back in the center, I passed the guest book near the entryway. Most entries were what you'd expect, thank yous, the occasional heart drawn by a child. But one signature stood out, IH. The message beside it was short, but it caught me mid-breath. You were right. But it's hard to say sorry when all you built is falling down. Keep building something better. I stared at it for a moment, not angry, just struck by the honesty of it. Isolde wouldn't say it to my face, but she'd found a way to acknowledge it anyway. That was more than I ever expected. I didn't write back in the book. Didn't need to. That evening, I took the final pouch of Grandma's ashes, sealed tight in velvet and quiet, and made the climb one last time to the ridge's highest point, the same trail she and I had walked when I was 7, holding her hand and naming wildflowers. At the base of the oldest tree, I knelt and pressed the pouch into the soil, not buried deep, just enough for the roots to find her. She had spent her life watching this place protect itself, and now it would protect her in return. We're not forgotten anymore, Grandma, I whispered. I stayed there until the light shifted and the cold crept into my sleeves. Then I stood, brushed off my knees, and made my way back to the house. Inside, the fireplace still worked, though I didn't light it. I sat instead near the wide front window, where the moon cast soft silver across the floorboards. The walls no longer whispered. They listened. A student group was scheduled to arrive in the morning, 8th graders on a field trip from Durango. I would greet them, show them the trees, explain the science. But what I really wanted them to understand was simpler. The next day, as they gathered near the east trailhead, one girl raised her hand. "Why did you keep the house if everyone thought it was worthless?" I smiled, knelt slightly so she could see my face clearly. "Because this house remembered everything," I said. "And so will we." Sometimes what others call worthless is simply something they don't understand. This story wasn't just about a cabin. It was about legacy, dignity, and standing up when everyone else tells you to sit down. Maybe the land didn't just remember me. Maybe it waited for me to remember it. Have you ever been given the leftovers in your own family? What did you do with them? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful family stories like this one. And leave a comment. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today.